back out here on the truck lineup. I've been around this truck my whole life. I've always seen it going up and down the road. They was pulling hay or what have you with it. We had actually used it one time to move a 16x80 mobile home with it. That was cool to see as a kid. That was in the early 2000s. My dad drove it a little while for work, so I've been around both this and that white truck for a while. But he never would sell it to me, but I finally bought it from him a couple years ago. I gave $800 for it. Now, I did buy it a while back, but it's been stuck at my dad's house 2 hours away. And every time I went down there, I never had the time to work on it. So I've been thinking about and staring at this truck for 3 years now. And it's been eating me up just wanting to work on it, get it back going. Now, besides this truck being a SuperDuty, besides this truck being a SuperDuty, 10 lug wheels, a little bit heavier duty than a 1-ton, but it actually has a hidden feature that makes it even cooler. Fellow 7.3 people will love to see this. So now here to start, we're going to try to get it back running pretty good and moving. And then later in the video, we'll check out what all we got to do to it long term and our plans for it. Now, this truck's been sitting for 5 or 6 years that I know of, and it ain't been used a whole lot before that. They mainly used it for hauling hay on the farm, so they'd have a gooseneck behind it. It never really got daily drove, I think. It just got pulled out to move hay certain times of the year. I worked with the feller's son for a while, and he was trying to get it going. I want to say he put glow plugs and a glow plug controller on it that I could tell. It's just got a old crusty 7.3 non-turbo. But unfortunately, the reason they quit using it, it ain't been running a while, so it's hard to tell, but it's milky oil. They parked it because it was getting warm, and then it started doing that. And they thought it had a bad head gasket. I hate that it sat for so long with the oil in the pan, but it is what it is. Now, when I bought the truck, I bought it pretty much writing the motor off like I'd have to do work to it. But as I've spent a lot more time working on these 7.3s, I found out a couple of things. My fan clutch on my truck went bad, so I tried robbing the fan clutch off of this one. Well, this one was bad too. So I'm thinking that was why they was having overheating issues. And then they thought they blew a head gasket. But they told me that it would only mix water and oil when you killed the truck, and it was sitting out in the yard cooling off, That's the only time it would mix the coolant and oil, which I thought was kind of weird, but at the time I bought it, I wasn't too worried about that. But I'm fairly suspect of this oil cooler. That makes perfect sense, that when you kill it, it don't have the oil pressure pushing the O-rings against the coolant pressure. And when you kill it, the coolant pressure overpowers and gets in the oil. So that's what I think's wrong with it. We're gonna cross our fingers on that one and hope that it is. Obviously, we'll have to come back if it ain't and tear into it some more. So to start out with, we're just gonna pull the air cleaner off and pull the glow plugs out of it and turn it over a little bit and see if we got anything in the cylinders. That'll be a good starting point. All right, let's see what we got. Be careful if you got some of these trucks sitting. That water will sit on these air cleaner lids and rust them out. Let's get all these glow plugs out of it. 7 more to go. Alright, well, surprisingly we got all 8 of them out. None of them look too bad or nothing. Usually they'll swell if they're the cheap ones. These actually look okay. I see Germany on all of them, so I think these are the actual Ford ones. You don't want to run your cheap parts house ones because they end up swelling the tip up and you won't be able to get them out the hole. And they have a bad habit of breaking too, so that's good to see. We got good glow plugs in it. All right, we got Maria pulled up here with some jumper cables hooked directly on the starter. Now, we don't have any batteries in this rig. It'll turn over awful slow, but we can at least see if we got anything in the cylinder. Well, like I said, not the fastest thing in the world, but found out what we needed to. Now would be the perfect time to come in here and do a compression test on this. That would tell you a lot about the engine. But I've been around a few of these, and when they've been sitting for so long, can guarantee you they have stuck rings. Maria was like that when I first bought it. And it had no compression on 3 holes, and all it was stuck rings. But I put rings and bearings in it anyway. So it turns over okay. Didn't have water in it or nothing. I'm gonna run it with all that water in there, so we're gonna come over here and go ahead and change the oil cooler O-rings in it, because I have pretty good hope in it now. Of course, if you drove a lot of 7.3s, you know you're gonna be familiar with this, but if you just got you one, you better get used to changing these. You got your front header up front in front of the engine cross member, and then you got this back one with the tube between them. I ain't gonna be able to get very good footage of the pulling the front mount off, but this back one has 4 bolts in it. It's pretty easy to take off. But right here you got you a drain for your coolant. We're going to drain the coolant right there first before we start. That'll get it down to a level in the radiator and all where you can work on it without getting covered to start with. Now we're going to follow the late great Diesel Tech Ron. He's a legend on the 7.3s, mainly the power strokes, but it applies the same to these. He has a video about showing you how to pull the oil cooler off and redo it. I don't believe it, but after watching his video, and if you leave the front mount on, you can put this in and take it out by just taking the back one off if you're careful with it. And I did it last time on Maria, and it makes it a lot easier, because usually people will try to put them together and fish them up through there, and it's aggravating because I've done it. But if you put the front mount on first and shove both of these into the front one, it's the easiest way to do it. More than likely you're going to get a bath when you do this, so be ready for that. Have you a drain pan and then some kind of tube or a funnel to poke up there to make it go in the drain pan without splashing too bad. I usually take me a decent 3/8 ratchet and break these 4 bolts loose. And then I use like a 1/4 inch ratchet or an electric one to run the bolts out. Now usually it'll stay stuck to the block pretty good because it's glued most of the time. And you just take your pry bar and get it wiggling to start with. As soon as you get it away from the block, you kind of wiggle it a little bit and then use your pry bar to pull the end of it off. Hopefully the end and the tube come with it, but it might just be just the end comes off. Kind of got to work with it however it comes. But when you get this loose from the block, you still gonna have more coolant and oil come out of it, so be ready for that mess. You can usually grab the exhaust manifold bolts to use for a pry point. And housings are thin aluminum, so they're easy to crack. Look at that oil. Can't even call that oil anymore. It's as thick as gear oil, though. That's so weird. It's probably the most stuck O-rings I've ever had. There we go. Now you know that's been real good on that engine. Here. Alright, we got it out from underneath the truck here. I even pulled the front one off. I've never had those O-rings stuck as bad as this one's been. There was so much dirt caked in there, it was hard to get apart. Now they got these tabs on here, on each end of it. I don't like prying against them because you'll break them off. I almost broke that one off. One of them kind of orientates itself in this groove. I mean, you can see this O-ring's all cracked, and usually it's this black one leaks motor oil out right there. But this orange one will leak too. That one actually looked like that O-ring was rolled a little bit when they put it in. So I'm still not 100% that this was our problem, but even if it wasn't, that wouldn't have lasted maybe 1 or 2 runs and it would have been leaking. So now we're gonna have to spend a lot of time cleaning this. These oil coolers ain't too fun to clean out. It takes forever to get the oil out of there. But we're gonna spend a lot of time with it since this one's got water and everything else in it. Now, usually, this one's actually pretty clean, but usually there's pieces of silicone poked in these holes. You'll have to clean that out. Surprisingly, this don't have any. But every time I do one, that one's actually got something stopping up a couple of them tubes. But clean all these tubes out. Make sure they're free flowing through them. A bucket with some gas in it. Spend a lot of time soaking it. I'll run a bunch of water through it with a water hose a couple of times. And then once I get it pretty clean, I'll brake clean it out to really get the last bit of the water and everything out of it. We're going to drain the oil out of the truck too, because it's going to take a long time to drain that thick sludgy stuff. I'll show you a couple of tricks for cleaning these housings up to make it easier to put together. And if you're trying to pry this tube or pull it out, be very careful with these housings, because you can see they ain't very thick. It's very easy to break, very easy to crack. Sometimes they'll just crack on the truck and they'll actually leak from that. So you gotta inspect them, make sure there's no cracks in either one. All right, we got the worst cleaned off of this. This is the front one. But anyway, you can see the lines from where the old O-ring was sitting right there. And you can see this dirt around the edge. Now what I'll do is I'll take this flat wheel and also kind of come at an angle like that and get rid of this hard edge on this ramp to make it easier to push the O-ring in there. That works so much better when you're putting these together. I remember the first time I did one, I had to put it in a press to get them to go together. Once you get rid of that edge, way easier. That edge will make you roll the O-ring. It'll cut it sometimes. Now another thing to notice is down here, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but down here where this O-ring seats down here is all dirty. We're going to end up cleaning both spots where all them O-rings ride on. Clean it up. You don't want nowhere where it can catch and roll. Or now, as you can see in the bottom, we got a bunch of gunk in our cooling system. We're going to have to get at that at a later point. And now on the gasket surface, I got to scrape the worst of the gasket off, but we're going to use these 3M bristle discs, and they make a real good surface for the gasket and gasket sealer to seal against. We'll come back after we got it cleaned up. Look at that beautiful mating surface. Those work wonders. Now you can take, this is a 2-inch one, this is a 3-inch, I believe. This 3-inch you can use to clean up this bore, the bigger one. And then if you take the 2-inch, you can turn your, if you take the 2-inch in your die grinder, you can turn your die grinder like that, and it'll clean the corners of them grooves out. Don't get crazy with it, because they will remove the metal after so long. At this edge where your O-ring slides in, I took this flat wheel and just barely kind of polished, made it a little bit rounder on that corner. That'll make it a lot easier to put together. Now we got this one yet to do, but like it's got a sharp burr right there. We're gonna polish all that up. That way we ain't got no risk of cutting the O-ring. Now out here on your bypass, make sure and push on that just a little bit and clean in there. Make sure you don't have any trash or anything holding that open a little bit. And then you can clean all that in there. I like to clean all these parts in gasoline. It's usually the cheapest and easiest. Give them a little good soak. Alright, we got both of these end caps clean. Got the burrs going out of them. Now normally I like to use a good engine assembly grease. I ran out on the last project, so we're going to just use some regular old grease on this one. Coat your O-rings really good, and then I put me a light little coat where the O-ring slides in these housings. And I forgot to mention, clean this oil cooler where them O-rings ride. Now in this case, I just have an old Molly kit that I've had for a long time. We're just going to use it on this one. Felpros, the O-rings ain't so great in the Felpro kits, so if I had the choice, I would probably go to a Ford or International dealership and get the kit from them, because the O-rings are a lot better in them. You won't, about 98% of these, you won't ever have a problem out of the gasket. It's always the O-rings. They'll go bad long before these gaskets will if you mount it up right. Now you'll need these 2 gaskets for a truck, but I believe this one's for like a van, so you won't use it. But whenever you're hunting these gaskets, you got to make very sure, like this is an idea, both gaskets have 4 holes in them, like your mounts. I went to local parts houses a couple of times, and they've tried to give me powerstroke kits, and the gaskets and all's wrong for it. You won't find out till you get home, and won't be the right one. Much trouble with the gaskets, but I like to use this anaerobic on them. I've had good luck using ultra black RTV, so one of them too. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount the front housing first, straight on the engine, stick our oil cooler tube in this one out here on the bed. And then when we get under the truck, we're going to shove the oil cooler into this one. You got to kind of wiggle the tube, keep from cutting these O-rings. You don't want to just force them together. That's all it should take. No more effort than that. Be careful not to poke anything in the dirt. There it went. Last little bit. Now we aren't 100% sure that there ain't a head gasket or cavitation yet on this old IDI, because they're pretty prone to cavitation. Since we kind of rolled out our oil cooler now by fixing it, we're going to leave our drain plug open on the oil pan. We're going to fill our radiator up and use a radiator pressure tester on it. So we got a 13-pound cap. That's about all you want to put on it. That's about all it'll take before you find out if you got a leak or not. Now this thing's been sitting for a long time, so there's no telling what else we're going to have for leaks, but as long as we don't have water coming out the oil pan, I'm going to be happy. Well, that's not what we was wanting to see. Besides the water pump puking, we still got water coming out of the oil pan, so definitely got a head gasket or cavitation in it. That's really unfortunate. Really hoping to get this one fired up and move it around here. Ain't much point in that now. Well, that was a complete bummer. You can't win them all, I guess. We'll have to come back at this one. To tear into that, we're gonna have to have a little bit of a roof over it, so I guess we'll have to get to our shed project soon. Got winter taking over now too, so we got to bump that up on the priority list. Sadly, this old truck just got bumped way down. There's still a lot of good left in the truck, so still hope to clean it up and get it back running and driving. I have some plans for the old girl. It used to be a septic tank company's truck, so it would have had a gantry system over it. You can see the I-beams right here on the front headache rack, and then it had I-beams. Then it had I-beams going to the top of the bed right there. So they'd back up with the septic tank on the bed, raise it up with the gantry, run it off the back of the truck, and set it off in the hole. So they just cut the gantry off of it and use it as a flatbed truck. So this is a real heavy flatbed. I think the deck's 3/16 plate. Got one heck of a built bumper on the back of it. Got a gooseneck ball. Got water and rust in them pretty good. Somebody spent some time building this bed at one point. It's got some cool drawers in it, both sides. This bed was built heavy for the septic tank service. It's got an I-beam frame for the main frame, so it's pretty dang tough. Being that this is a Super Duty, it has disc brake rear axle. I think it's a Dana 80. I don't remember. But it's got sway bars front and rear too. Check out that leaf pack. Interior is pretty rough nowadays, but I gotta save these floor mats. That's good old school mats there. I'm gonna save them and clean them up. Those are worth saving. But this is a 5-speed truck. But it's got a special weapon. Let's go check out what that is. Now this is a Super Duty with disc brakes on the back, so they're in a parking brake off the back of the transmission with that drum. Now this is the main reason I wanted to buy this truck right here. It's got a 3-speed brownie box behind the main transmission. I think you can shift this one on the fly too. I'm not sure of the gear ratios in it, but it should have underdrive, direct drive, and overdrive in it. With the 5-speed overdrive and the overdrive in this. You ought to gain some speed over that old Dana 80. I'm not sure what gear ratio is in that, but it's gonna be tall. So if we ever do get this truck running and driving good, that ought to help us out on drivability of it. Really don't want to, but if I end up having to part ways with this truck, I wouldn't mind putting this in Maria. That would be a real cool way to go to. Double overdrive in that truck would be really nice for the interstate. Now ideally long term, I'd like to get this truck running and driving. It'd be real handy on the farm. It's rated at 14,000 pound gross vehicle weight, and Maria's a 10,000, so we'll be able to tote more on the bed. We'll have to be careful with trailers unless I put farm tags on it, because that truck could real quickly get over CDL with certain trailers. So now the only thing this thing's got going against it is the fact that it is a Super Duty with that 14,000, so it'll be bumped up into commercial insurance plans. Now assuming plans don't change, one of my main goals with this truck is to come back here and put a dump bed kit on it. Probably a scissor hoist kit, and pretty much turn it into a little dump truck. This bed would work really well for that. You know, it's beat up enough I wouldn't feel bad doing that. And it ain't never gonna be a show truck, so build us some short sides for this bed. And it'd have pretty good payload for this size of truck anyway. It'll always be cheaper to hire to haul in rock, but I work right by a quarry on my way home, so I can stop by and get 3 or 4 tons of it on the way home from work. And a dump bed would be super nice around here on the farm. I bet this was a cool truck back in our prime. So for right now, we're just gonna set this truck up to where it can sit for a little bit longer without ruining any more than it already has. We're gonna try to get back to it pretty soon. But anyway, I found out what I wanted to know on this truck. Unfortunately, it ain't good news, so I guess we'll catch back up with this one later on.